let's talk about something really hard, but also really important. And that's starting over. Really at any time in your life, but specifically in midlife. And that's where I am. And this is what's happened to me. And I thought I would tell my story and maybe it will help you, because I think it's something that a lot of us go through. I mean, you may have lost a job, got laid off, quit, or closed a business like I did. And, we go through a lot of stages that are really uncomfortable. And then we sort of have to decide how to pick up the pieces again and move on. Because I know if you're watching this video, you are resilient and you're trying to figure out maybe what your next move is, but you're not quite sure maybe how to do that. So let me just tell you my story, and I want to see if it helps you. So I'm a physician. I'm still a physician, even though I closed my medical practice a few months ago, and I had been a doctor for 25 years. And it was really hard because, really from the age of, 28, when I first got my MD, it's all I've ever done. And so it really becomes part of your identity. And I wasn't one of those doctors who was really big into being called doctor. I really didn't have a big ego about it. But, I think now that I'm not doing what I had been doing for all of those years, it's really hard to think about, well, where do I fit in now? So, I had changed from conventional medicine to a more holistic, integrative, and functional medicine, and I just absolutely loved it. And it took a tremendous amount of courage to quit my stable, conventional medicine job and to jump into this new venture when I knew absolutely zero about starting a business. And this was, more than 10 years ago, and there just wasn't the same level of support that you can find now for entrepreneurs. But I was super excited and ready to learn, and I just felt like it was my calling to do this. And, so I jumped in feet first, quite honestly, and worked so hard to build up this practice. And quite honestly, it was successful for a while. And I'm not one to give up. And I, even when I hit the hard bumps, I kept going. And, there was something deep inside of me nagging me that something wasn't quite right. But, I'm a Gen Xer, so we were taught growing up that you just don't give up, you're resilient, you don't complain, and you just put your nose to the grindstone and keep going. So that's what I did, because I thought, well, I'm a doctor. I've spent all this money and all this time doing this, and then all this other training, becoming a functional medicine doctor and doing integrative medicine. I've spent, what else could I do? I have to make this work. So I just kept going. But there was just like this little voice inside of me telling me there's something missing. It wasn't like I didn't like patients. It wasn't like I didn't like the subject, but there was something about the energy of what I was doing that was starting to really, really, really deplete me. Now, honestly, it is hard to run a medical practice, period. And it was a small micro practice, so I didn't have a lot of help. So I was doing all the business stuff, and then at the same time seeing really complex patients. So over time, I just noticed that I would just be so exhausted by the end of the day. I really became completely burnt out. And this is a story I want to talk more about because it's important, the whole concept of burnout, and it's totally different than just being stressed. Believe me, I've made it through a residency, fellowship, many years of working. It wasn't like I wasn't up for the task to do this, but there was just something off. In any case, I finally decided to listen to that inner voice and realize that I was done. And so I think I was very courageous again to quit, to literally shut things down, not knowing 100% about what I was going to do next, quite honestly. And so maybe you're in a similar situation So I want to tell you a few things that have helped me get from where I was to where I am now. And I think they might be helpful to you as well. Number one is definitely reframing the sense of failure. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a recovering perfectionist, and I always looked at failure as failure. And I've read so many books that have told me otherwise, and I'm finally starting to understand that concept. That failure is, really a learning point, a challenge, an opportunity. And I think that's true. So I've had to reframe for myself this failure of being in my 50s and closing a medical practice and not knowing quite what to do next. So I had to look back and say, what did I do that maybe I would have never had the opportunity to do had I not taken that risk of leaving my stable medical job before, when I was employed and given a nice salary and a car and benefits, to take on this new venture. Well, I'll tell you, this is what happened. I was able to learn. I did a fellowship, so I learned so much more information that I would have never known. I did functional medicine training, so all new knowledge I would have never known. It opened me up to a totally different group of people in healthcare and people in the healing arts. It also allowed me to get recognized for what I knew and to write a book that was actually published. I got the opportunity to be on podcasts. I was actually even on national TV. Opening up my own practice forced me to learn things like bookkeeping and accounting and social media and sales and marketing and creating a website. All these things I never would have learned had I just stayed in my, easy practice. The other thing that I learned is I learned how to talk to people, both in public. So I gave talks in my office twice a month for like 5 or 6 years. So I got pretty good at public speaking. But then I also got the opportunity to speak to larger groups because of my expertise. I would have had none of those opportunities. And so even though in the end, I failed with my practice, I gained so much along the way. So I think reframing is really important. Step 2, and this has really been hard for me, is to practice self-compassion. Now, I've been preaching self-care for over a decade because that's what we do in integrative and functional medicine. And I would say I'm pretty good at that. But one aspect of that self-care that I have been not very good at is self-compassion, and they're totally different. I have a pretty serious inner critic, and you may too, who tells you, you should have done that better. That was so stupid, you did that. And I really have had to work hard on, quieting that inner critic and focusing on being kind to myself, which is sometimes really hard. But if you do it again and again, if you work on reframing those negative mindset and inner critic, it really, really does help. Because in the end, self-criticism does not fuel reinvention. And I'm all about being accountable. I think that's important too, is we have to be accountable to ourselves, because then, how do we learn? How do we make sure that we're progressing? Step 3 is to go inward before you go forward. So what I mean by this is, when I decided to quit my practice, I still had patients and I had to keep things open, for about another 6 months as I sort of dismantled things. And right off the bat, I wanted to figure out what I needed to do now, because that's the kind of person I am. I'm always a doer. I'm always very action oriented. And quite honestly, I needed to work because I needed the money. So I did get a part-time job almost immediately, but I got a job that was not going to overwhelm me, because I knew I was not going to just jump into something else. that was not why I was ending this part of my life. I really wanted to take time to listen to that inner voice that I had literally ignored for years and years and years. And I knew that in order to do that, I needed to step back, I needed to get a little quiet, and really listen to myself, and also listen to feel into my emotions. Because I think a lot of times it's easy to intellectualize things or to just use our thinking brain and not really listen to our soul. And that was really hard for me because, again, as a doer, I was like, I need to figure this out right now. But I didn't. I slowly started to do more for myself. I started doing some creative practices. I slowed down. I focused on having some calming rituals. I started to meditate. I really just wanted to get quiet. And that has been so helpful. But the other thing it's allowed me to do is really think about what is my next move? What do I really need to listen to now? So these things I thought were really helpful. I started to look at and think about, what did I love to do when I was a child or before I ever went into medicine? What were the things that sort of lit me up? Were there hobbies? Were there things I was attracted to? What did I watch, read, listen? Because I think that's so helpful, because we get conditioned in our older life and then we get on this train track in our career and put our blinders on, and it's like we never really think about anything else. Now, I know things are different now because as a Gen Xer, again, you get on the train and you don't get off. I think this, younger generations are used to switching careers and questioning things and speaking up. But that was just something I had never learned. It's something that I'm figuring out now at a much later stage in my life, and that's totally okay too. I also wanted to look at my life in medicine and think about, what did I love and what didn't I love? Like, what was a good fit? What wasn't a good fit? What can I take from that? Because I still love medicine. I still love science. I still love working with people. But how can I do that differently? What can I take from my experience to put in my next venture? And then the other thing is, what's really good for anyone, regardless of whether you're trying to find a new job or you're going to start a new venture in your life, whatever that may be, is think about what are your transferable talents. Maybe you were an accountant and you think, oh, that's all I can do is be an accountant, but maybe you supervise people, or maybe you were a great communicator. Maybe there's something that you did that you can now transfer to whatever it is you want to do. And so I think taking those skills and really looking at how can you apply those to your next new thing. Now, step 4 is really about feeling in to where you want to be. Could be 6 months, could be a year. And you can do this in several ways. And this is really, really important because we talk a lot about visualization, right? And visualization is amazing. It can be really, really powerful tool in trying to imagine what you want your life to look like. This, of course, a lot of people use this to great effect. Pro athletes visualize, how they're going to perform in a game. CEOs and entrepreneurs visualize how their company is going to look. And I think that is important. And there's a couple ways you can do that. You can do that just by visualizing, you can do that by creating a vision board. You can also talk to yourself. If you are a person who is maybe less visual and more auditory, making a video telling yourself what your life looks like or recording yourself could be really, really powerful. But I also recommend that when you're doing that you literally you get the emotions and the feelings of what your life is like. Because I think that we tend to over-intellectualize things and use our brain too much and forget about our deep, feelings, our gut feelings. And so that's been super helpful for me. Now, step 5 is to take all of that information that you have, your visualization, and then to create a real plan, one that has measurable goals, right? Specific goals. And you can use the SMART acronym, which is, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And that's a good way to map out your goals, say over a 6-month or year longer, whatever it takes, because it really keeps you on task. But it's also very specific and relevant to you. I know that I need a lot of accountability in order to get things done, because I get very excited. I tend to go down rabbit holes, and I love learning, and I'm very curious, and that is a benefit, but it can also be a detriment. So having SMART goals are really important to me. But I think it's also important to know that things are going to change, right? You're going to come up against things that you're like, oh, this is really hard. I don't want to keep going in this direction. Or you may find out, oh yeah, there's something that, is interesting to me, and I might have to take a little bit of a pit stop, and that's okay. But it's also important to stick to your guns. And I think for me, of course, I love learning, and that's why YouTube is so cool, because yes, I've been doing social media for a long time on Instagram, but being able to do these long form content videos is really right up my alley, because I really want to take all the years that I've spent in conventional medicine and functional medicine, and also just my experience of going through burnout and, starting over in midlife, and sharing information with a community who might find it helpful, and to be able to support each other as we, stay happy and healthy and flourish in midlife and beyond. I hope this video helped you. And if you're in the middle of your own reinvention in midlife, let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more content like this, please let me know. Share, like, and subscribe. I'd love to hear more from you, because, midlife is really the beginning. It's not the end. So let's all do this together. So I'll see you next time.